The global poverty of informal workers. At 4:30 a.m. in Yogyakarta, Indonesia, a motorbike driver opens her Gojek app and begins the first of many trips that will fill her day. A Gojek driver I know lifts a small portable oxygen tank into the compartment of her motorbike, and she holds the tank with both her feet. Many years of untreated chronic kidney failure make it difficult for her to breathe. However, she still rides through traffic, delivering food, picking up passengers, and fighting exhaustion because she cannot afford to stop working. Each day, she faces the same risk: no health insurance, no paid sick leave, no guaranteed income, and no support if her condition suddenly worsens. The company owes her nothing if she becomes too ill to drive. Tomorrow, she will wake up and do it again, not out of choice, but because there is no safety net beneath her. Her story is not an exception. It is part of the global poverty of informal workers. According to the International Labor Organizations, around 2 billion people, about 61% of the world's employed population, work in the informal economy. The informal economy does not provide stable contracts, social protections, or legal recognition. Informal workers include street vendors, domestic workers, gig drivers, and day laborers. Their poverty is not just low income, it is insecurity, lack of voice, and exclusion from basic protections. Indonesia, where about 3 out of 5 workers are informal, is a powerful case study of how structural dependence on informal labor traps families in cycles of vulnerability. The global dependence on informal labor represents one of the most neglected drivers of poverty today. Billions of workers sustain economies while being denied basic protections, income stability, and the freedom to plan their future. We must address this injustice because informal work is not an individual choice, but a structural constraint that undermines fundamental human capabilities and demands urgent ethical and policy responses. So, what is informal work and why it matters? The International Labor Organization defines informal employment as work that lacks basic social or legal protections and employment benefits, including the absence of formal contracts, social security coverage, paid leave, or protections. This framing emphasizes that informality is not only about unregistered economic activity, but work performed without the protections that allow people to survive illness, injury, or sudden income loss. The International Monetary Fund states that informal work consists of economic activities that have market value and would add to tax revenue and GDP if they were recorded. While WIEGO, or a global network supporting women workers, describe the informal economy as a diversified set of economic activities, enterprises, jobs, and workers that are not regulated or protected by the state. In conclusion, these definitions highlight that informal work matters not only because it is economically invisible, but because it leaves workers legally unprotected and structurally vulnerable. The vulnerability of informal workers affect a huge number of world's population. According to the ILO, around 2 billion people are engaged in informal employment. Informal workers include street vendors, day laborers, domestic workers, agricultural laborers, and platform-based gig drivers, whose livelihoods depend on unstable and unregulated conditions. In Indonesia, the scale is similarly big. Indonesian national labor statistics show that approximately 59.11% of workers are informal, with the proportion even higher among women. Informal workers often earn significantly less than their formally employed counterparts and face wide income volatility, making long-term financial stability nearly impossible. So, what is the relationship between informal work and structural poverty? WIEGO suggests that the average income for formal workforce is higher than the informal workforce. However, informal workforce is multifaceted. Within the informal workforce, there are different status in employment. Informal employers have higher earnings compared to their employee or other regular and informal wage workers, followed by casual wage workers, domestic workers, and industrial workers. In summary, all of these employment statuses are considered informal workers and they are below the pyramid, which suggests that they are at higher risk of poverty with low average earnings. Informal work actively produces and sustains poverty. The defining characteristic of informal employment is not low income alone, but also a deeper insecurity. A deeper insecurity is about the absence of protections that allow a person to survive economic shocks, plan for the future, or exercise control over their life. Due to lack of contracts, health insurance, paid leave, accident protections, and legal recognitions, any illness, injury, suspensions, or market fluctuations can immediately eliminate their only source of income. This instability limits human capabilities by undermining health, safety, and autonomy. The capability most directly threatened is bodily health. Informal workers work in an unhealthy conditions, such as being exposed to pollutions, extreme weather conditions, or working long hours without rest, and they have no access to employer-provided health care or income protection. Additionally, informal work also undermines the capability of bodily integrity, since workers are exposed to harassment, unsafe streets, dangerous clients, and workplace risk without legal protection. And Indonesia as an example of global informal work poverty. In Indonesia, informal labor is ingrained in the country's economic structure. It significantly shaped the lives of low-income workers. Indonesian national labor statistics show that approximately 59.11% of Indonesian workers are employed informally, with women disproportionately represented in this sector. It means that the majority of workers in Indonesia live without contracts, health insurance, or legal protections. The human cost becomes visible in individual lives, other than the Gojek driver I know who fights for her life working while dealing with severe kidney failure. Many Gojek drivers experience deep insecurity due to unpredictable platform policies, severe bad weather incentive, and fictitious order. Allegedly, some drivers and advocacy groups have protested the account deactivations and the effective firing policy after low ratings because it happened without transparency. They have no rights to appeal because there's no contract or agreement. Therefore, they can get fired anytime. Another job insecurity is further illustrated by the phenomenon of fictitious order. A few drivers I know have received fictitious order or fake orders from irresponsible users. They receive a food delivery orders from customer. Oftentimes, the driver pays for the food when picking it up from the restaurant, and the customer pays the driver when the driver delivers it. However, after picking up the food and giving it to the address did not exist, and they could no longer contact the customer. As a result, not only did the driver not get paid, but they also had to pay for the food purchased. The company will not bear the cost of this unfortunate incident, the driver will. Fortunately, in October 2020, an article from Gizmology explained that Gojek introduced a feature in its driver app that to allow drivers to report fictitious order or fake order, as these had been common enough to warrant a formal reporting system. Additionally, the human cost becomes even more apparent during severe weather. During a heavy rainstorm, demand for food delivery increases because people stay indoors and want food delivered to their door. The incentive to earn more during bad weather often pushes drivers to continue working through windy, flooding, low visibility, and slippery condition riding their motorbike, putting their health and safety at significant risk. And why the poverty of informal workers remain invisible. So, despite its scale and severity, the poverty faced by informal workers often remains invisible to the public and policymakers. And one reason is legal invisibility. Because informal workers lack formal employment status, they are excluded from labor laws, social insurance system, and official protection that would otherwise document their working conditions. Their struggle rarely appear in administrative data because they lack contracts, benefits, or employer records. It is making the hardship they face easy to overlook or dismiss as informal choices rather than structural constraints. A second reason why informal workers struggle are undocumented is because there is a power asymmetry built into algorithmic system between the company and the informal workers. According to Rest of World, Gojek drivers frequently do not understand why they receive fewer orders or face sudden account suspension because the platform does not disclose the logic behind its rating or allocation algorithms. The lack of transparency creates the illusions that workers are responsible for their own instability, when in reality, their livelihoods are shaped by decisions they cannot see or access. Third, social attitudes contribute to invisibility. Many customers view informal workers, street vendors, domestic helpers, or delivery riders as quote unquote helpers or maid or drivers, or in Bahasa Indonesia, ojol, rather than as laborers whose work is influential to their life. Their contributions are normalized but not valued, and the risks they endure, such as working through storms, navigating unsafe streets, absorbing financial losses from scams, or abuse by their employers, are rarely acknowledged. Finally, because informal workers often operate in public space, such as streets, markets, and neighborhoods, their hardships becomes part of the urban life, absorbed into everyday life. Poverty becomes familiar, and what is familiar becomes invisible. This normalization causes this structural injustice at the heart of informal labor.